All right, on to the next session. This is the Rados Gateway again with a discussion on NFS. So I guess you can keep going, Yehuda. You're going to be pretty tired by the end of the day here.
Already tired. Yeah, so NFS.
Right.
We are talking about a new feature in which we export Rados Gateway
So
data
these are the
through NFS.
huskies. I took one of
Let's
them.
mute Sage.
Sage is on his way out. It looks like we're going to have to do the rest without him. I just muted him, though, so you should be able to keep going.
All right. So a new feature where RGW data is gonna be exported through NFS. The current gateway obviously cannot do anything like that. We all only go through the RESTful API. The gateway itself has some kind of an abstraction layer at the top, although it's not really visible.
The leader has muted your line. To unmute your line, press #6.
Although it's not visible to users, but operations are kind of abstracted at the top, making it possible for us to provide the fast AGI interface and also the Civet web web server. And also we have some kind of internal load generation utility that's not really documented, but it was pretty easy to create because everything was pretty much easy to, everything is kind of abstracted. So on the other hand, we don't really have an object interface. It all goes at a really high level, at where we're saying at a request level. So basically, we can create a RESTful request, but not really have an access to the bucket creation directly without creating an entire request structure. So it's kind of too high level. So the question here is what would be the best way to attack such an issue, and we have a few options. So one option is to create what we discussed years ago, librgw, and then that means to take the abstraction, create an abstraction level, and make it so that buckets, we have a library that provides an easy access to the data through bucket operations and object operations, something kind of like librados, just for instead of using Grados directly, it uses RGW. And some of the work that was done for Hammer, the versioning work, should make it easier to create such a library, because stuff has been cleaned up a bit, especially in the Rados layer, and object creations and object operations are pretty much isolated. Yeah. But on the other hand, the problem here is that when you want to mount users' data, you want to be able to preserve all the user permissions. And that means that you need to go through some kind of to have some kind of a user context when you do those operations. And so maybe going to the bucket object interface is not quite the place to do it, or maybe the library should have some kind of a user context in which when you create a bucket, you specify which user you have to specify which user, but it also it's not gonna work as kind of a part of the Rados gateway code, but it's gonna need to apply all the user credentials and authorization and everything. So that's one way to go. The other way to go would be to use some kind of like go completely beyond the gateway, and use the gateway and take advantage of stuff like S3FS Fuse, which is a third party that allows mounting of data through the S3 interface, in which case the user credential issues aren't going to be an issue, because if you're going through the S3 interface, we capture everything. So with S3FS Fuse, we're gonna mount Redis Gateway, and then on top of it, we can put some kind. There are also two options. One is link it directly with some kind of a with Ganesha, which was providing up until recently a Fuse abstraction layer. This would have been kind of the preferred way to go, maybe. I'm not sure what's the pros and cons for it, but because there are less moving parts. So you have Ganesha, you have S3FS Fuse, and you link them together and mount the gateway. And so it might not be, well, maybe if you link directly Ganesha to the gateway, there are less moving parts, but then you need to develop much more new code. So that's probably the shortest way to get to something functioning. The problem here is there are two issues. One is, as I said, Ganesha took out the Fuse abstraction layer, at least on their development branch. So we'll need to resurrect that. The other thing is that S3FS Fuse is mounting a specific bucket and not a specific user. So we need to do some modifications there in order to make it work at the user level and not the bucket level. Unless, of course, we can do it on the bucket level. Like we can say we can change the requirements, and then no, it's not an issue. Another issue with S3FS Fuse is that it doesn't mimics S3 ACLs correctly. For example, if you say, if you do a chmod on an object saying chmod plus G, plus A, 777 something, or, to make it so that, well, I forgot how chmod works. Is it A plus G, right?
Something like that.
Yeah. Or G. Anyway, if you wanna give permissions for someone to read, to make an object publicly readable, then it's gonna be tricky because it doesn't support that directly. Well, it gives some ability to to create user group permissions, but it doesn't override the S3 permissions. It just creates some kind of a metadata, object metadata, or modifies the object metadata. So it basically handles its own access.
It seems like it would be really useful to know what the users are expecting here. Like even with respect to mounting individual buckets versus mounting an entire user and seeing all the buckets as directories, knowing what other systems that do this, like Swift has an NFS gateway now, or Swift Stack, I should say, and there's like what Scality does, like what they do in these situations, or whether they make any attempt to like map the Unix permissions to something like public or private ACLs for objects or something like that.
Yeah, that would be nice if someone could chime in, if anyone has any experience with that. Then now it's time to speak up. Well, in any case, if that is needed, then if you going through the S3FS scheme, then we definitely need some kind of modification to the code. So we'll need to add that, which is not clear to me whether that's the way to go.
We probably need to fork S3FS.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's that time again.
The only one who... No, it's not.
It's not just you. I assume Patrick is
The leader has
working
not
with
yet
Patrick.
arrived.
Yeah,
Please
I have
stand
a
by.
ticket open with blue jeans. There's no reason that or any of the beeps or messages or anything should be playing, but they do. Blue jeans apologizes. But there's not a whole lot we can do about it.
All right.
Well, that's a commercial break. And anyone wants to bring up their product at this point? I'm just kidding.
So I dropped off while I was getting in the car. The first option that you talked about, was that writing like a Ganesha specific plugin? Is that the one that you started with?
Yeah. The first one, well, there are a couple of options how to do it, and I only brought one. One of them is creating some kind of a lib RGW and provide a bucket object interface. Direct bucket object interface and then link it with Ganesha. My problem there is that we need to have some kind of a user context and user, when you create a bucket, or when you even more than that, when you read an object, you need to make sure you're following all the ACLs and everything. So any kind of library that would do it would need to do stuff that the gateway does, different layers, different places that include user authorization. So it might be like we can do it, but it's not gonna be a clean, you're gonna clean up the gateway and just provide some kind of hooks into it and voila, you got it. No, it's kind of need to be more intrusive, or I wouldn't say intrusive, but it's gonna be tricky because you need to make sure that everything plays together correctly. And another option is to create a much higher level gateway library that goes in the request handling, kind of like Logen, which basically generates different functions, different functionality through creating requests into the gateway's code. So in that way, we exercise the complete gateway user authorization path, and the operations are gonna be very, very high level. So instead of saying create bucket, you'd say put bucket. This is the user credentials for that specific operation. It's gonna be not as it's not as efficient as doing it through a library that cuts through the bucket object APIs, but probably easier to implement. So
it seems like it'll be easier to write and a little bit more generic. Like it's almost like it's doing almost exactly the same thing that S3FS Fuse is doing, but just plugging into a different API.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, it basically create a bunch of RESTful operations, just that you don't call whatever library that sends them over the wire, just link it directly to the gateway code. And
do you know what S3FS is? Do you know what S3FS is doing when you write to a file? Does it, like, when you open the file for write, does it start a put and then like stream the data to the file as it receives write requests, or does it try to buffer the whole file in memory and then do a one big put, or is it sort of some
I don't
hybrid of the
know.
two?
Yeah, I didn't follow that completely. I don't know if it buffers everything. I know that it does a multi-part upload, so it probably streams it some, like buffers chunks of maybe 10 megabytes, and then once every 10 megabytes is written, it sends it.
That makes sense.
Um,
That makes sense.
yeah. Um, so we can probably do something similar, and it shouldn't be a huge issue. And like, if I needed to vote at this point, I'd say that's probably the best route to take. Do something like that, and then link it with Ganesha.
Yeah, that certainly seems, that's my preference, I guess. But probably the first step before we really do anything is to make sure we understand what other people are doing here and what the expectations are for namespaces and whatever. Otherwise, we're gonna get it wrong. So that's probably the next step. Either way.
Right. Getting some real world use cases, real world requirements maybe, and yeah. Because it's probably easier taking S3FS, I don't know, packaging wise, but taking S3FS and mounting it, and the last option would be not to use Ganesha and just mount it, which I mean, mount it and then re-export it, which is probably not as clean as using Ganesha, but it's as an option, it still exists and doesn't require changes to Ganesha. Right.
Okay. Should we move on to the last one?
Sure, if this one's all set.
Yeah, unless someone want to chime in. I don't see everyone